Welcome, book fiends, to Wicked Good Books, a channel dedicated to books and all things book adjacent. My name is Nick, and I am joined today by the incredibly gifted storyteller Kerstin Hall, author of the Star Eater book and the Michaela Cycle, which includes The Border Keeper and soon, coming out August 16th, Second Spear. Her short fiction has been published by Strange Horizons magazine, and she is a first reader for Beneath Ceaseless Skies. Kerstin, as both an avid reader of yours and a writer myself, this is sort of a double-edged dream of mine to have you on the show. So thank you so much for being here, and welcome.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I feel like I'm kind of lucky here because I saw your newsletter came out today, and I was like, ooh, I'm going to pop in and check this out before I start the interview today. And I know you visited the States for a little bit, which is where I'm at. Any fond memories or your favorite highlight from being over here in the U.S., or do we kind of leave a bad impression? That's not your first time?
No, it is my first time. I'm not well traveled. It was my first time in the States.
All right.
I've been there. I was there for 6 weeks though, so that would be a lot of highlights.
Wow.
Yeah, I was there for Clarion West, it's a writing workshop for anyone who doesn't know, and it was really, really great. I got to spend 6 weeks with 17 other fantasy and science fiction writers, and they're all amazing.
Awesome.
So yeah, that was the best thing that's happened to me in a couple of years. I had a great time.
I love that. So did you live like in I know some workshops will have like either a con, like a hotel reserved, or like a reserve.
We actually moved venue halfway through. So the first, I'm not allowed to say exactly where we're staying because I don't think Clarion West wants like people to randomly show up at their accommodation. But we're trying a new venue for the first 3 or 4 weeks of the workshop, but that didn't work out. So they moved us to their original venue, which was in northern Seattle, and it was delightful. It was really, really nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so we were near the University District, which was very cool.
6 weeks, that's amazing too. I don't know. I'm hesitant to say, was it productive? Just kind of see what else is coming out under Hall's name for new books coming out.
It absolutely was. I mean, the whole idea of Clarion West is that you write fiction while you're there. So we had to produce 5 stories within those 6 weeks. I think in total the class produced something like 481,000 words.
It's amazing.
That was 18 students, so like it's divided amongst the group, but we still think we were up there and like record breaking.
I mean, that's awesome to have that many writers, even to just be that productive. I mean, getting one writer to be productive myself is difficult. So having 18.
You should go to Clarion West.
Honestly, I've been thinking about it. I've been really, we'll get to that when I get to my little writing segment, but I definitely would love to go to a workshop like that. I feel like that would be like where I would thrive. Before we get into books and writing, I want to just get to know you a little bit, and for my viewers and for your readers to kind of get a little insight into Kerstin Hall, not your personal life, but just like where your inspiration comes from. I know you live in Cape Town, South Africa currently. Have you always lived there? And do you find a lot of inspiration in your home city or in your environment? Or
Yeah, no, I was born and grew up in Cape Town. I went to university the next province over, which is the Eastern Cape. So I went to Rhodes University there, and then I came back to Cape Town again. So nice. I really haven't traveled too far. Yes, like I mean, I'm definitely influenced by my context, and I'm quite a descriptive writer, so I'm extensively influenced by the landscapes around where I live and up towards Namibia, which had a lot to do with the Border Keeper, which I've talked about in other interviews. I always feel like I'm going over the same thing, but yeah, like the deserts and the salt pans of Namibia play a lot into the Border Keeper.
I love that. Well, no, I saw that, or I read rather, that you studied journalism too. I'm sure that is a huge factor into how you kind of view your worlds as you're writing them, and how you collect that data and share it with the reader. I did see also you received a Mandela Rhodes Scholarship, and you went back to school for your master's degree. Was that also in journalism, or did you go for something else?
No. Okay, you've been stalking me through the internet. I got the Mandela Rhodes Scholarship, which was really, really great and very generous. And if you're a student in Africa, absolutely apply for that one. And I went back to a different university. I went to the University of Cape Town, where I studied creative writing. So I did an MFA
That's
in
awesome.
creative writing now. Yeah.
That's so cool. I ask because I have my bachelor's degree in creative writing, and then I didn't go back to school until I was, I want to say 29. I think I was 30, but we'll say 29 to make myself feel better. I went back to school at 29 for my master's degree in film production. And I remember the biggest thing that kind of stood out to me was just my own perspective of what it felt like to go back to school, not necessarily geared towards what my dream career was, but just going back at a slightly older age or more wiser age. Did you find that that was the same for you going back?
Well, I didn't have a break in between.
Yeah, you just like
I
boom,
finished
boom,
my
boom.
journal degree and then moved straight into the next one.
Smart.
So,
like a totally sensible person would do.
I mean, maybe. I'm like, maybe I should do another degree now. Maybe that would be a good use of my time. Yeah, I don't know what else to study though. So,
right. I deeply enjoyed my time going for my bachelor's in creative writing. It was such a good experience. It was a really small college, like in the middle of the woods in New Hampshire, and it was a really kind of like a Island of Misfits kind of vibe. And if I was going to go back to school, I almost, even though I've like in the past I said I would never go back for writing, getting my master's in writing would be kind of nice to kind of lock down that skill set.
Yeah.
So it's awesome that you're able to do that. So in talking about, you know, your love for story and journalism and creative writing, what's the earliest memory you have of stories, like stories being told to you, or have you always wanted to write?
Yeah, I've definitely always wanted to write. I also at one stage wanted to be a paleontologist. So, yeah. Didn't follow that when I realized there was like copious amounts of maths involved. No, my mom used to read a lot of stories to me when I was small. The first things I can really remember writing was I distinctly remember plagiarizing Swan Lake in the second grade. And just getting bored of writing it, so like cutting it off and like everyone just dies before they're actually supposed to die. And my teacher going like, "Are you sure it ends there?" And I'm like, "Yes, no, definitely. That's the end of the story." Because I wanted to go play outside. But no, it's definitely something that I've always been drawn to and wanted to pursue, and I got lucky. So yeah, continued with it.
I love that. Did you have a lot growing up? Were there a lot of stories in your household, or was that like passing down stories? I know for me, my mother was really big on reading at an early age, and she had me reading books. Like I think I got The Hobbit way too early, so I was like, "Mom, I'm reading Goosebumps and Animorphs. Like I don't have time for The Hobbit. That's way too much for me." But I kind of like worked my way towards it. But stories kind of always revolve around me in that sense. I had a lot of older cousins that would talk a lot and tell stories a lot at the dinner table at Thanksgiving. So you got really good at listening to people tell stories in my family. It's a big Italian family, and then really good at like talking quickly, because if you didn't talk fast enough, you were not going to be heard. So that's kind of like where my storyteller sort of background comes from. I didn't know if you had a similar story, or if it just started in school for you.
Yeah, no, I think it was mostly at school. There were definitely always books in the house. That was always a thing. But I definitely didn't have like an oral storytelling family, that's for sure. Yeah, none of that.
Checking out your newsletter from today, I was kind of going through it and seeing what you were up to during your time in the States. I see you picked up Master of Jin. Have you had a chance to read it?
Well, Jelly was one of our instructors, so I got to. I know.
That's amazing.
No, he was so lovely. So I got that book as a prize, which I was really pleased about. So we had weekly raffles where they like handed out books, and that was one of the ones I got. So I was quite chuffed about that.
That's really awesome.
But I haven't read anything. I've been reading my classmates' work and literally nothing else. So hoping to get back into that soon. Maybe I bought a whole stack of books back. Yeah,
that's awesome. I love that. I thought it was an excellent book. It's really cool that Jelly was one of your instructors. That's mind blowing. That's so awesome. I love his work. I think I started with Ring Shout and just devoured everything else after that. Really looking forward to what he comes out with next. So that was part of the workshop that you had just done?
Yep. And he's a very generous and smart person in person. So I'm looking forward to his book.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's really cool. There's like a lot of short fiction that kind of comes out before, and similar to like the Michaela Cycle novellas, he has a lot of the Dejin universe novellas that kind of lead you into possibly a larger
to the
piece,
larger, yeah.
which
He
is
was
really
talking about
kind of
that a
neat.
lot.
Yeah.
He said it's an unusual path, that things just sort of like fell into place for him that way, where he had one short story that happened to get picked up, and then the next things are just like built on that, which I thought was quite a cool way of building a career. I don't think it's a common way of going about it, but I think it's really nice. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about workshopping, because I know this is a while ago for me. I graduated my bachelor's back in 2011. And I remember in the beginning, workshopping was like, it like just filled me with anxiety. And I think it's pretty common for a lot of younger writers. At least it was for me and my classmates, but I got like better and better as we progressed. I remember towards like my junior and senior year, I like loved it. I like lived for workshopping and critiques, because I think, you know, you get to know each other a little bit more over that amount of time, and you kind of know everyone's strengths and their sensitivities, but also like how to help them grow as a storyteller. And that was something that I hadn't experienced anywhere else, even in my personal life. I was just kind of curious to know what it was like going to Clarion West and being around all these talented people, and if you feel like you were able to kind of pull from all those different creative outlets.
Oh no, for sure. I think what was really nice with Clarion West is that everyone was sort of on a similar level in terms of their writing. Like everyone was really, really very good. But everyone was doing things that were incredibly different. So it didn't feel competitive to me at all. Like I could not produce a story that Sloan produced. I could not produce a story that Steph produced. So it was very much like, okay, it's very clear that we've all got our own voices, and those voices are all doing different things, but there's no real sense that we have to like one up each other. And it was just a very supportive environment. I hadn't really encountered community like that before, so it was a new thing for me, and I'm really sad they all now live in a different time zone. But it was still completely worthwhile for those 6 weeks to have that experience. It was kind of like revelatory to me. So it's something I would like to reconstruct in different forms closer to where I live.
I love that. That's awesome. That's excellent. I feel like I hadn't more recently, this past year, I think 2 NaNoWriMos ago, I started my own group of just like friends that I met through YouTube and Wicked Good Books, other writers. And it's been like, there's only about 4 or 5 of us that are really active in it. And we meet like twice a month. They're usually like an hour-long Skype call or on Discord. And it's the best, like just being able to have that communal feeling of sharing your work with someone that's not going to just be like, it's your family. My wife's a pretty tough critic, so I usually go to her with a lot of stuff. But everyone else is just sort of, if they're not writers, they have a different view on it, which is good to have that. But to have other writers looking at your stuff too, there's something about that's just super intrinsic to productivity, and inspiration and motivation. I feel more motivated than ever when I'm with my workshop group. I don't know if that was the same experience for you, but I imagine having 6 weeks to do 5 stories, you probably have to be pretty motivated.
Yeah, you really have to go. There wasn't much sleep. But no, it was definitely, because everyone else is working hard, it's easier for you to work hard. I produced more words more quickly than I have in like a decade. So
that's amazing.
There was one story, my last story, where I don't know quite what happened, because I'm not a fast writer. I am pitifully slow. But I produced 11,500 words in 3 days, and I was like, wow. Yeah, a complete story. I mean, it's a mess, but it's a complete mess. So that was good for me, I think. Yeah,
I love that. Finished, not perfect. I don't know, whole different level. I know for me, I have such a hard time at the whole finished not perfect thing. Like I find myself getting caught in editing loop as I'm going, and then not being productive. So having those deadlines and having that motivation of like communal experience, but also like wanting to kind of keep up with everyone definitely helps too.
Yeah.
What do you use to write when you draft? Are you on just Microsoft Word or Scrivener, or you just a notepad?
I tend to mix it up a little bit. So most of my drafting is Microsoft Word, but if I get stuck, I'll write on paper. So like I like my fancy stationery, but yeah, like I'm not like precious about it. I mostly just write on a computer in Microsoft Word 2007, because I hate change. So I refuse to upgrade.
Nice.
I'm good. But yeah.
2007, it's a great year. I can relate to that because I just got the new. I recently just got a new computer, and it came with Word, and I was like, oh no, oh no.
All the buttons are in different places.
They're all different colors, and it's all like sleek and modern. I was like, no, give me back my old stuff. So now I'm kind of bummed. I've been kind of leaning more towards Scrivener. When I saw that I got Word, I was like, well, I'll check it out. And honestly, it's great, but I like it more simple, like the old one. So totally relate to that. I saw on your website that you are also into, just trying to can't change gears here for a second. You're into photography. Is that like a hobby, or do you, when did that start for you? Is there a place people can view your art?
My mom was super into photography, so I inherited some of her old camera equipment, which was kind of that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I haven't done photography in a while. Like my website is somewhat out of date, but yeah, I love art. I love photography. So, but I guess I was quite into art in high school. So a lot of my photography was like taking reference shots for potential artworks. But since then I haven't like kept it up so much. I went on a couple of photo trips to like Namibia or like the wilder parts of South Africa, but not so much. Yeah. I mean, there's some photos on my website that I took. Yeah.
Yeah, I was checking those out. I was like, oh, they kind of have that moody atmosphere that Border Keeper and Second Spear have. I kind of dig that. Cool. It's all kind of intrinsic. I like it. So I just thought that was neat. I wanted to bring it up because my wife's a photographer. That's how we actually met, through art school, and she's really big into old film cameras and things like that. So I didn't know if you were into like older film cameras or more modern or a bit of both. So it's cool that you got to inherit a bunch of old equipment from your mom. That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing because I don't have to pay for it.
That too.
Yeah.
Always a plus, especially now. Film is like, it's like a resource, a diminishing resource. But so before we jump into talking about your work, which I'm super excited to do, I did want to know, because this is something that I actually learned while just kind of looking into information. I wanted to ask you before getting into a work, and something that kind of like looked really interesting to me that I had no idea even existed until like 3 nights ago. What can we talk about Beneath Ceaseless Skies, for those who don't know?
We can.
So how did you get involved with that, and maybe give like a just a one-line pitch of what it's about and where people can find out about it? Because I was like digging through it, and it sounded amazing.
No, Beneath Ceaseless Skies is a secondary world fantasy magazine with a special focus on character. It's run by Scott H. Andrews, who is like one of the best editors in business, in my like completely unbiased opinion. No, he's the best. And you can submit your stories there. So yeah, it's a professional publication. I've been there for a stupid amount of time. I think I've been working there for 7 years now. Scott's been very patient in the times when I neglected to read as many submissions as I should, as is the case right now. Sorry, Scott. So, but yeah, it's a really fantastic magazine. It's not as like flashy as a lot of the other fiction publications for fantasy and science fiction in the short field, but it's like a mainstay of the industry. So yeah, I love talking about Beneath Ceaseless Skies. I get stuck on this in every interview, but yeah, so I read submissions there.
I think it's great. I stumbled upon the website, and I was like, I just like walked into like a treasure trove of Narnia. I was like, whoa, like I know what my weekend's gonna look like, because I didn't know this existed, and I have some stuff to read and listen to. So that's really cool. I love that focus on the secondary world fantasy. It's actually one of my questions I want to ask you about that specific subgenre, because it seems like Star Eater and Michaela Cycle, their secondary fantasy, secondary world.
Yeah.
Is that what interests you most about that genre? What first drew you to it, and why do you like to write in it so much? Is this one of your favorite genres, or do you feel like you have the most freedom in it?
Yeah, I mean, it's always been kind of my favorite, a little bit. But I think working at Beneath Ceaseless, I can't even pronounce the name. Working at Beneath Ceaseless Skies, definitely crystallized my taste. So I think that my writing as a whole is quite similar to what we publish at the magazine, just because that's what you sort of over time learn to value. Yeah, it's secondary world fantasy really works for me because I get to set all the rules. And when I get to set all the rules, I can do whatever I like, which really appeals to me. I like that, the like largeness of that sandbox and the freedom to play. I think that's really fun. And also it requires less research, and I don't love research. So yeah.
I love that. We get to create your own rules, so it's like you don't even need to. I mean, even if you do create the research, you could just flip it on its head and do something completely different.
Yeah.
So
I'm not saying I don't research. I'm just saying I don't like build in extra work for myself. Yeah.
I love that. So that's really cool. It's a subgenre that I have recently found myself kind of stumbling into, not realizing what it was until like reading, like, I want to find more books like this, and then just kind of like stumbling through and like, oh wow, there is a whole genre here that I haven't really even explored. And I found myself really drawn to Star Eater. I had picked it up right after finishing Hair of the Ninth, and I was just like really just hungry for some sort of darker gothic magic kind of vibe, and I wasn't finding it anywhere. And the cover stood out to me first when I had seen it. Sam Weber's art is amazing.
It's amazing. I got so lucky. I was just like, yes, sell my book, Sam.
Sell my book, Sam. It's gorgeous. And I was like, I gotta pick this up. And so that'll lead me into us talking about your work. And I think we'll start with Star Eater and kind of end with Second Spear, because I'm really excited to talk about your upcoming release. But selfishly, because I came in it with Star Eater and loved it so much, I wanted to kind of pick your brain and ask you a few questions about it too, if you don't mind. How would you describe?
I wrote it quite a while ago, so like you might know the answers to these questions better than I do, but I'm happy to try.
I promise they won't be too deep cut. But
okay, cool.
So if you could describe Star Eater in one word, what would it be? And I can give you mine if you want to think about one. So mine is phantasmagorical was the word that I picked up. And I thought I was being fancy when I thought of that, because I spent a good hour on it like a few months ago. And this is like when we were first in the talks of doing this interview. And then I started seeing other blurbs using that word. I'm like,
yeah. No, I was like, you just took that from the Guardian review.
Yeah, I saw that and I was like, you son of a bitch. Like, no. I'm like, whatever, you know what? I was there first. I picked it first.
Okay. Oh gosh. I have no idea. I don't summarize things. Have you seen the length of my books? All of them are supposed to be short stories.
Is that how Star Eater started, as a short story?
Yeah. No, I think I originally I was still writing it in university, and I think I was in my second year. And I think I was trying to submit it to Sword and Sorcery magazine. That might be the name of the publication. It's defunct now. I can't actually remember. They rejected me. So yeah, it started as a short story. Then I was like, oh, I could make it longer. And then Tor came out with their novella program. So I tried to submit Star Eater to their novella program and was rejected again. So Tor.com rejected it as a novella, and then they accepted Border Keeper from me, and then asked like, do you have any novels like lying around? And I was like, yeah, I've been trying to rework this novella into a novel. Didn't tell them that they'd already rejected it, and then they accepted it. So
nice.
I feel like I gamed the system somewhat.
Yeah, I love that move. It's a power move right there.
Just keep sending it until someone says yes.
You just slip it under the stack. There you go.
Yeah, no, I took way too long to write that one. Yeah, I won't do that again.
When did the short story start?
Oh gosh, probably 2014, 2015.
Wow.
I can't actually remember.
So it was with you for a long time then?
Yeah. And it was just a story that, like, it just never really came together the way I wanted it to, and I just kept trying to fix it. And and then I wrote Border Keeper, and I was like, oh, this is fun. I should write more of this instead.
Portal magic, woo! I love that. Well, the world in Star Eater, it's super unique. At least, and I tend to read across genres. I read a lot of horror, sci-fi, and fantasy, and then I love when what I really love is when a genre or one book can mix all three of those things. That's like my favorite. And I found that to be the case in the Starter. Has a little bit of all three of those genres kind of plugged into the secondary world. What was your inspiration for coming up with such a unique and visceral world of Atrium? Mountable cats, cannibalistic nuns, magic being used as a form of science in a secondary fantasy world. Tell me everything.
Well, the world building, the setting tends to just be like me having fun. So that's just me flourishing. That wasn't really the genesis of the story necessarily. I tried to make it sort of amplify the conflicts that were there. I started very much with the magic system, in terms of like cannibalism as magic. So I was looking at what would be the worst thing a character could do in order to acquire power, and that was eat your parents. Yeah, that's how Star Eater came about.
I mean, makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and it went from there, and I made it dark and terrible. So yeah.
I love that. I found it to be so not just unique, but just like visceral is the only one I can think of, because even though I read the blurb, I guess I didn't like put it together that was going to be how the magic functioned. Yeah. So when we try to
like make it not too awful. Not that I have a lot of control over the cover copy. Like generally, that's marketing's problem. But we tried not to make it like too much like there are cannibals in this.
It was great. Like I mean, I found it to be very digestible. Sorry for the pun, but it was. I found it to be like, I would talk about it to people like, this book is so good, you got to read. Like, what's it about? I'm like, this. But wait, like,
listen, it's not that bad.
It's not that bad. It's dark, but it's not that dark. But it's dark. Yeah. But you'll love it. Yeah. So that was how I
don't think I'm that dark an author. Like I tend to like accidentally stumble into fairly terrible concepts, but I don't think I'm that much of a. I think I'm fairly optimistic in terms of how I depict people in their relationships. So
absolutely,
it was
palpable. Absolutely, I found that the bond between them, and we'll talk about this in a second, between Elfrida and her mom, to be like so profound and like heartwarming, even though that bond is so twisted. But I always, when I'm reading a book like this, especially Secondary World, I always try to remove my own personal bias and ways of how our world works, because I think once you put our world morality onto a fantasy or sci-fi world, depending on the sci-fi world, you're kind of doing a disservice to the world. You want to learn the world's rules first and see why that they're doing these things. It's never like if that was our world, it would be a completely different context to how it's happening in Atrium. But I think what I love most about this book was the cost and effect of that magic, and the lace work. Like I could not picture how it looked on the cover, and I don't know if that's how you intended it to look, but like it was just so dark red neon color lines. It just like blew my mind. And how this entire society was structured around this very delicate balance, built on that tradition. I love that book especially trusts the reader and doesn't handhold, which is another huge check off my list.
I get a lot of critiques for that, though. It's like that's a very divisive one, where I'm just like, I don't want to tell you anything, and I know everyone's gonna complain about it. But it works for some readers, so like I'm not going to stop doing my terrible like find out as you go along style of world building.
I wanted to ask you about that too, because I find that to be a recurring theme in your work, this environmental storytelling that I found myself more and more drawn to as I've gotten older. And I don't know if it's just my reading tastes change, or the things that I find surprising now and that actually take me elsewhere, versus something that's more, I don't want to say formulaic, but kind of like paints by numbers. You kind of just follow along. And sometimes I find those, I need a book that's, I hate to say mindless, but a book that I don't have to think.
It is helpful to know how things work. Like I don't dispute that.
Yeah, and sometimes I'm in the mood for that, but I find more and more lately, and going to my 30s, I'm 34 now, that I'm more drawn to these books that have this environmental storytelling aspect, where you learn about the world through the dialogue and through the world descriptions. It's almost like a Dark Souls game. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Souls games on PlayStation or whatever.
I haven't played them. I am familiar with them. Yeah.
Similar to that, where you're like, and those games divisive also. So some people are like, why do you like this game? This is miserable. I'm having not a good time. I have a good time playing them, but I also like the challenge of it, you know? And I found that to be the case with your work. And I just wanted to say that I love it and like keep it up. It's awesome.
Thank you.
So going into wrapping up on Star here, I mentioned Elfrida and her, the scene with her mom. I think it's towards the end that I was just totally, I actually like got emotional while I was reading it. And I found that scene to have various levels of emotion. And it was just so beautifully done. When did you write that scene? Did you, I don't know, I know how I write, and I'm trying to get better at writing chronologically, but I never succeed. Do you write chronologically, or did you kind of like push that scene off to the end? Like, I'll handle that on a different day?
No, I'm heavily chronological, but I edit everything to death. So like versions of that scene had been written over and over and over. And it was one of the later things that I edited. So yeah, like it was definitely a late puzzle piece. But I try to write from beginning to end. I don't think I could do it otherwise. I feel like I would lose track of what's going on.
Same. I've tried and I fail every time. I don't know how people do it. I think it's amazing they can do it. I try to get better at it, but my brain is just like, oh, I can't answer this question without saying how I got here. So I have to go back, and it always ends up being a mess.
But then how do you know how to go back to? Yeah, no.
It makes a mess. So
yeah,
I totally feel you there. That's awesome that you saved it to edit it later. I love that. It's such a beautiful scene, and I don't want to spoil it for anybody that hasn't read it yet, but check out Star Eater if you haven't already. Will you ever, I've asked you this before too, so this is a very selfish question of me. Will you ever write in this world again? Are you thinking short stories, novellas, or nothing? Asking for myself, but also for fans of your work.
I think it's highly unlikely I will ever return to Star Eater. Like, I've kind of made my peace with that novel. I don't think I'm going back.
Cool.
So yeah.
I love it. Cool. Awesome. Honestly, that just makes me want to cherish it even more. Go back and read it again and just be like, this is a self-contained thing, especially in a world of a big, giant, chunky series. It's really nice to have this like special gem you can fall back to. I just finished book 6 of Stephen Erickson's Malazan series.
Ooh, and I love those. Yeah.
Oh, so good. Bone Hunters was probably my favorite so far of all of them that I've read. And I was trying to read it back and forth, like do Malazan 1 month and then Wheel of Time the next month, and I totally fell off Wheel of Time like halfway through it. It just didn't hold me the same. I like it, but not as much as I like Malazan. But I told myself going into the new year, I was going to read less chunky series and more just standalones and novellas. And so far, it's been off to a good start. I picked up Border Keeper not that long ago. I want to say it was either 2 or 3 months ago. And was totally surprised by it because I think I went into it with I had this issue a little, sort of. I looked at the cover and the title, and I don't know why my brain does this. I don't know if it's because I have a film background and I'm a went to school for writing, so I try to like not guess what the story is going to be about, but look at it and be like, I get the vibe. I kind of put this like flat image in my mind of what to expect. And it's the worst thing to do because you bring that baggage in and either you're extremely disappointed or you're not, or surprised, which I love to be surprised. So I went into it thinking something completely different, and then like right out the gate I was like, oh my goodness, okay. I like readjust myself. And so I had to ask, where did that story come from? I know you mentioned some of it came from inspiration from your environment, from where you live, but it almost felt reminiscent of like Pan's Labyrinth to me a little bit, telling something straight out of like Dark Crystal and Labyrinth. Like I half expected at one point like for David Bowie to walk out in his chaps and be like, what's up? But then it became wholly its own thing, and thankfully it became wholly its own beautiful thing. But I just couldn't help imagine a lot of these settings and creatures in that sort of practical effect way, like the Dark Crystal, Pan's Labyrinth kind of vibe. Like all the creatures felt very real and tangible, and that was something that I just want, like, interview aside, just wanted to compliment you on, because I find that reading creatures or places that are like out of this world or surreal or uncanny in book form especially, sometimes it can feel like when you're watching a movie and there's bad special effects where you're just like, that's not real. It's like the new Jurassic Park movies where you're like, they're not in any danger, that's a CGI dinosaur, versus like the old Jurassic Park movies or in Pan's Labyrinth where you're like, I think that's a real creature. I think they found Pan and they and that's how I felt reading your the Michaela Cycle. So just super awesome. But I want to know, where did that story come from?
Okay, well, I'm trying to remember specific influences on it. I know that I had just been in years before that really blown away by ancillary justice, which I know doesn't sound like an obvious like parallel for this book, but I was very interested in the idea of a protagonist who you couldn't see into the head of. So that's what I was playing around with a lot with Seth. So thanks, Anne Leckie. Just my idol. And then in terms of the world building and creature design, I'm afraid that's mostly just my head. So I don't think that really came from anywhere specific. Unless I had also just read China Meevil. I had read Perdido Street Station, and it wasn't that I was like necessarily cribbing off him, but I think I just had a realization that wow, you can be really, really weird and get away with it.
Yes.
That sort of gave me permission to be really, really weird and try to get away with it. So I guess those would be the two main books that might have played into Border Keeper a little bit.
I love that. That totally makes sense too, and I love that it came just straight from your brain. Like you have this ability to make these uncanny, weird scenarios and settings and creatures and characters that feel very real, and that is something for me that if I don't believe it, if I don't catch on to it quickly enough, I still can enjoy it, but I feel there'll be this little wedge between me and the work, and I'll read it in a different way. Whereas like Border Keeper, I was in that world, touching, feeling, and smelling everything, and that was just like such an awesome, unexpected experience for me. I absolutely loved it. I think what stood out to me also, aside from your wonderful prose, which is also just thick with texture and atmosphere, you can really touch and smell and taste this world, for better or worse. Well, but I did want to is what you were able to pull off with these two characters in the book in such a short amount of time. We have is it Vasith or Vasath?
Vaseth. I did a stupid thing where I added an E on the end for funsies, and ever since I've had Vasith happening to me, I'm like, no.
Cool. Because if Vaseth, when it comes to the small cottage of the Border Keeper, is it Inez?
Inez. Oh, Eris.
Eris,
yeah.
Seeking to cross, he wants to cross his border essentially into a different realm, looking for someone because of X, Y, and Z, he can't say. But she sort of denies him this, and he sticks around and does chores for her. And there's something almost folklore-esque about this situation, and like something out of an old fairy tale, or from like a fae story. That I just love so much, and I was totally just enamored with these two characters and their dialogue between them and their bickering and how their relationship grew from that point onward. Like I wasn't expecting the humor, I guess. What I'm getting at when I was reading. I was like,
never thinks I'm funny, so I appreciate that.
I found myself laughing out loud like throughout, and I didn't know if these characters were like inspired by real people in your life or they just came solely from your imagination.
No, definitely not.
Because they felt very real. They felt very real. So. I love that. So last thing I had here about Border Keeper that I really enjoyed, and I kind of wanted to know what the inspiration was, or because I haven't read a ton of Portal Magic. I think the most recent one I read besides Border Keeper, and Border Keeper's it's not fully Portal world hopping, but it's similar. I think it was A.K. Larkwood's The Unspoken Name.
Oh yeah, I read that.
Which is
that.
Yeah, it's really good. I think it's more like Spelljammer D&D in that one, but there's still like a sense of like world jumping into these different portals and stuff. In your world, or Michaela Cycle anyway, there's body swapping and possession, rotting and deteriorating bodies and portal magic. It's a beautiful eeriness, especially in some of the worlds we traveled to towards the end of Border Keeper. It almost gave me like What Dreams May Come vibes. With some of the more bizarre creatures towards the end, like the crab that's a guide. That was like, again, one of those creatures that in any other in the hands of someone else not as deaf with prose the way you are would have been like, okay, this is talking crap, I'm not gonna feel anything for it. And I was just like right there with them, smelling the salt water, listening to this guide, like, yes, take me anywhere, I'm listening. Like I was fully affected. And I don't know if it's because Steven Erikson has just like hit me with so much weird stuff that I've had to be like, that's a talking puppet, let's go, like you should have roll with it. But even with his worlds, there's sometimes a disconnect, and I didn't feel that way at all with Border Keeper. What made you want to include body swapping and possession and kind of jumping into different bodies as a way to jump into different worlds?
Yeah, I just really like possession as a trope. I like every book I read, I'm like, okay, there's not going to be possession in this one, and then I'm like, it would be fun. So yeah, no, the body swapping was just something I thought would be fun. The possession is something that I can't seem to get away from. Um, it's just a trope that I really enjoy. I like the idea of getting inside other people's heads in uncomfortable ways, like people being sort of smooshed together really appeals to me. So that's something that is still happening going forward. So yeah.
I love that so much. It's neat because in all three of these books now, the way you handle magic and the rules of it, and which are, again, they're not hard, they're not explained. It's not like a Sanderson book where it's a hard magic system where you're explaining everything out. You kind of have to figure out as you go. But one thing that is consistent that I notice is that there's a cost to using it, and again, that's just one of those things next to environmental storytelling that I just love in my books now that I'm reading. I don't know what.
I feel like magic should have a cost. Otherwise, I don't know what the stakes of using it are if there is no cost. So
Yeah.
like I think most magic systems do function that way. I just think there's more creative costs that people could apply, which is something Absolutely. I've tried to do in my own work.
And I think you succeed across the board with it, and I think it's great. I'm thinking about, like, even when I'm playing video games and like I'm playing a magic user character and I run out of mana and it's like, your mana is low, and like, I guess I'll just drink this potion or I'll rest and it'll come back. Yeah. And in your world, it's not that simple. Like in all your worlds, there's a cost to it, and it weighs on the person's physical body and their emotional body. It's what I kind of like look for now when I'm reading fantasy. So I got like the Kerstin Hall standard now for magic systems.
Oh wow.
And I really enjoy it, and I'm really excited to see if it carries over, how much of that carries over into Second Spear. Again, Jamie Jones did the cover art for Second Spear.
Yes, I got so lucky with the covers. I was just like, yes. So cool. Yeah, I think my editor, we had a discussion where we specifically wanted Tin to look like she could punch through a wall, and like Jamie Jones delivered. I've never been so happy in my life. I was just like, yes.
Sure, she delivered. Tin definitely looks like she is it Tyne or Tin?
Tin, just Tin, yeah.
Tin definitely could punch through drywall, through several sheets of drywall. That's the vibe I get looking at the cover. So let's jump into Second Spear, because I started it a couple nights ago and I'm really enjoying it. It feels so good to be back in this world, and I can't wait to own it physically. And I hope one day I find myself in South Africa, Cape Town, and be like, Kerstin, sign my book, but in my Star Reader book. But did you have the entire Michaela cycle planned out before you started Border Keeper, or did you have like the whole thing in your mind, or are you kind of just going with inspiration, running as you go, or do you have like an end in sight for it?
Okay, so I wrote Waterkeeper as a standalone, which people seem to assume that I didn't, but I did. And then as I was writing Waterkeeper, my editor specifically asked me to like include Tin more, and I found that I really enjoy Tin scenes, and I was like, oh, I can see where I can go with this in the future. And because at the end of Waterkeeper, I'm not going to spoil too much, but one of the main antagonistic forces just sort of isn't really resolved. I was like, okay, cool. So towards the end of writing Borderkeeper, I did know that I wanted to write a sequel. I definitely knew that. Starting out, definitely did not know that. I would like to write more, but that's up to my publisher. Second Spear does not end on a cliffhanger, but it does end in such a way that it's obvious that I want to write more books. So yeah, I've got the next one mapped out in my head. I had it mapped out sort of while I was writing Second Spear. And Second Spear came together very organically and quite naturally, and it's my favorite. It's my favorite book that I've written.
I love that.
So I'm really hoping that other people will appreciate this one. Yeah, it's my baby.
So there are many planes of existence in realms, in Ari and in Mkalis. Did you have like a drawn map somewhere in your wall or in your head of like how far apart they are from each other or how connected they are? It almost reminded me of the Warrens in Malazan, but those are like a different level of confusing. I don't think Steve knows what that map looks like, but I get the sense that you probably do, at least for yours.
No, well, if I had to have a map, it would have to have 999 realms, and I can assure you I do not have 999 realms. I make them up as I need them.
Cool.
So I know a couple of them in spare of what I have. Um, but there's not the way that the world building works is that it's not really that spatial so much as it's built around the ideas of consent. So the size of realms isn't that significant as so much as how they're connected to one another
Cool.
politically, which is fun. So I don't need a map because they're all discrete, but they're all connected by channels. So
Which makes sense.
there is no map.
Cool.
I occasionally would have like a map of a building, like just so I knew the structure of a specific location, but no, not in terms of like mapping out an entire underworld. No.
Exactly. I can only imagine just like you need like a whole wall space for it, like a mural by the time you're done. So considering Ari is kind of like the primary world, or how I understand the physical world, and Mkalis is the secondary, sort of like an afterlife world.
Yeah.
It kind of reminded me a little bit of What Dreams May Come. I don't know if you've ever seen that older film with Robin Williams.
Nope.
I think it's based on a Richard Matheson short story. He's the author that did I Am Legend.
Okay.
It's more of like a Christian myth version of the afterlife, but what I liked about it was that everyone that goes into their heaven has like their own version of it, and then once they're ready to move on to like actual heaven, they step into like what's really there, which is a whole other world with multiple worlds connected to it. And I love that concept, and I have seen nobody like do something similar or something reminiscent of it, even unintentionally. And when I was reading Border Keeper going into Second Spear, I was like, ha ha ha, like this is my way to like finally get to enjoy a fantasy book. Exactly. Because I'm not a super picky reader, but I found as I've gotten older and as I've read more and more stuff that my tastes or things that I'm like hungry for or like I'm hoping for, we'll say I'm hoping for, has become a little more narrow. And so when I find something that's I think is unique and just different than everything else that I've read and that I want either more people to talk about or that it just feels like it like checks all the boxes for me, I like get hype. I get super excited about it. And your work has been on that roster. So I wanted to ask too, do you have because talking about like visualizing it and seeing your world, do you have art of your world commissioned or plans for artwork? I would love to see these demons
that
in
sounds
the world.
lovely. No, I don't. Greg Manchess once did a very cool painting of Eris as part of a masterclass because, I don't know, something to do with the tour art department had like an overlap with this masterclass thing for artists. So there's a very cool portrait of Eris floating out there on the internet. But other than that, there's been some fan art, which has been really lovely. There has been very limited fan art. Like, it's like not much, but I've appreciated all of it. No, I haven't commissioned any art or anything like that.
Once Twitter gets its fangs into it, it's all once they get into it, it's all over. It'll just be an endless stream of hashtag Kerstin Hall.
I'm not against it. I'm not against it.
Yeah. So, because I love like the crab and Border Keeper or the crustacean character with the being inside of it. Which, yeah. And LaFay, the demon, with the way they are described right in the beginning of Second Spear, which I was so excited to see some of these characters kind of popping back up again. Which is cool because I have read so many books in between a Border Keeper and Second Spear, having literally just finished Bone Hunters, like in between all this. So like my brain's like with characters, but like seeing these names pop up, I was like, oh, Tin. So I would love to see the demons in your world. So I get the sense that they're not, or at least how I view them, they're not solely based off of like the Christian myth of demon or like.
No, not at all. I this has caused considerable confusion. I just decided to call them gods and demons. I've been kind of like not fully revealing how gods and demons work. Like it is in the book, but people don't seem to like pick it up necessarily. But gods are rulers who've just inherited their realms, and demons are rulers who've conquered realms in order to ascend to rulership. So that's really the only distinguishing factor, but it has like wide-standing political consequences, and there's a lot of tension built into that world building that I'm like exploring in book 3. Please let me.
Yes.
But yeah, it definitely comes up in Second Spear. Yeah, but that is the distinction between them, and it's not intended to be theological at all. I was just like, gods and demons, that's a fun distinction. Let me just use words that have existing meanings for my own purposes.
For sure. I think it works too, because the way they're described many of the times, I don't get that vibe, beastmen or goat-headed demons or the horned
that is
creatures.
absolutely not what I was going for. So
and so it totally works, but now I'm just like, I want to see these things. I want someone to just like go nuts with Procreate and just draw a bunch of art for Border Keeper and Second Spear. So Twitter, if you're watching this, which I know you will be, go nuts.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
So what are you most excited for readers to discover in Second Spear?
Ooh, okay. I really want them to enjoy Tin. I really want them to enjoy the sort of trio that goes on an adventure together. I think that there's a lot of fun dynamics going on there, and I hope that people will pick up on what I'm doing. I'm not sure they will. But yeah, I think I'm really excited for people to meet the fungi demon. Like, they're one of my favorites. I'm really excited for people to meet the like terrible cats. Yeah, the thing is, there's just lots of fun little details that in isolation are completely meaningless, but it's just fun world building things that I got to play with. But yeah, mostly I think the relationship between Tin, Rian, and Ven is my favorite thing about Second Spear. So I hope people like it. Yeah.
So with all these features, was this all things left over from Border Keeper that you wanted to include but couldn't, and to kind of put off to a sideboard? Or maybe like in the pandemic, did all this, I'm not sure how things are over on your side of the world, but I know for us, like, be kind of isolated and stuck at home and just having more than enough time to just dream up worlds and creatures. Like, did all this stuff kind of come after Border Keeper, or is a lot of this like deep?
I wrote Second Spear in 2019. This book has just been delayed like you wouldn't believe. So it was pre-pandemic.
Wow.
So yeah, no. Books take a long time to get published. So it was edited this year, but it was written a long time ago. So that pandemic didn't play too much into it.
Cool.
Yeah.
So a lot of what we're reading in Second Spear, this is sort of like, is it newer material that you created upon writing it, or is it just from your notes of the? Basically, I'm wondering selfishly as a writer myself, like how much your world building. Because I know with my stuff, I'll have things that people will never see. It's just like I'll spend 2 nights writing about these creatures that are going to be a sentence and a paragraph that no one's going to care about, but I care about it.
Research study, teeny little detail. Because Border Keeper and Second Spear are structured in the way that they are, in that the world building is kind of as large as I want to make it. I can take it in whatever direction I want to make it, just because I've got 999 realms to play in. So actually 1,000, but spoilers. But I could quite easily continue the series without disrupting too much from the previous. So although I had strands from the Border Keeper that moved into Second Spear, a lot of the writing process was generative in itself. So as I was writing, I was like, okay, I can have this realm that does this, I can have this realm that does this, and I can use this to explore various character conflicts. So the main thing being that Tin has a fairly significant imposter syndrome. How can I make that bad for her? And then how does that interact with other characters and their own insecurities and the wider world and what's going on there? So how can I link all of those things up? So a lot of it was generated while I was writing the novel, while I was outlining. So there were definitely threads from the Border Keeper, but a lot of it was not pre-planned.
Cool.
Yeah.
Straight from the hip. I love that. I'm always curious, just like learning other authors and writers' processes and how they put together their worlds that's so vivid and wild and seemingly endless, especially when you're dealing with this many realms, or worlds. I think it's just really cool. But have you, so in your books, you talk, or at least specifically Border Keeper and Second Spear, it seems like one of the big themes is life after death, mortality. Do you find yourself, is that a theme that you think about a lot in your personal life and it comes into your work, or is it more or less a topic that you like to explore with your work? because it's a topic and a theme that really fascinates me, and I don't see a lot of authors exploring it in this way. And I was just curious, honestly.
I don't know how much that's a preoccupation for me. I think I was quite interested in the notion of grief, which I think comes up across most of my work, but also about home. Home is something that comes up a lot. So the idea of realms as potential homemaking spaces. Eris's home is obviously quite significant in the book, and Tin's feelings about home come up a lot. So it's more. There's a lot that's to do with, I guess, nationhood. Nationhood comes up a lot in my fiction in terms of navigating self within nations that either are uncomfortable to be in, or that you don't feel quite at home in, or that you aspire to be. Like I'm interested in nationhood and how that factors into individuals, I suppose. So I don't know how much life and death factors into my work, except that I find it dramatic and angsty. It's more conquest and nationhood is a big one. Yeah,
I love that. It's so interesting too, because these people wake up and at least in the beginning of Second Spear, they wake up in these Spear's bodies and like they're slowly forgetting their past lives, but kind of like everyone comes in different. And I like that Tin came in like very paranoid and like kind of like on her toes and very defensive, which I thought was really interesting. Whereas
I was about to give a spoiler. I was like, wait, no, Borderkeeper. She has reasons to be paranoid.
And I think it's Ryan, or I believe it was Ryan.
Ryan. Yeah.
One of the characters she meets in the beginning who's like freaking out. And I just love the concept of like coming into your second life and still kind of holding on to like remnants and shades of your past. But I like that also that it fades away. And it's kind of interesting to see these characters in this new place having to now make that their home and make this strange place less strange by being in it, which I think is just absolutely
fascinating. Well, a lot of it is that I guess in the world building, death is not a fixed condition, because Tin and Co are very much alive in their afterlife, and then they can die in their afterlife, and that still feels like a real death before they're reincarnated. So it's just circles of reincarnation. There's no true death, barring a few circumstances. I have not got to yet. But yeah, so I think that I found that interesting, sort of like, and vaguely hopeful, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you pull from any real world mythology from our world, or did you kind of hodgepodge them?
No, I just made it up. So
love it. Have you ever read Lost Gods by Bram?
No.
Highly recommend it. It's very different than Borderkeeper, but there's a afterlife vibe of like starting over in this new realm and taking up a new role and having that become your home essentially, and having to kind of let go of where you came from. It deals a lot with purgatory and deals with a lot with other world religions and world mythologies, kind of hitting a crossroads, similar to things you'd see in like Sandman or American Gods. But Bram is wonderful. He's an amazing artist, and I couldn't help but feel that when I was reading Borderkeeper and now Second Spear. But they're two separate things, but I was like, these are the stories that I crave, and they're hitting this topic that I think not a lot of authors are hitting on. I love exploring the afterlife and thinking and just pondering about it and reading about it. I don't know what this is about me, but I do love unique takes on reincarnation too, especially when the world can feel so vivid and lived in. I feel like when it doesn't feel that way, it's hard to connect to it, and that is the complete opposite experience I've had with your work so far. So it's been really cool to kind of hop into the Michaela Cycle and feel like I'm there, but also like strap in for the ride and be told a story that is completely unexpected. At least when I finished Borderkeeper, like I had an idea of what I was getting into, and then was just over and over and over again, just surprised. I remember I want to say I was maybe 3 or 4 chapters in, and they were in their cottage. And I don't want to give too much away, but they're arguing about something, and I was just like, "What is happening here?" And then she went out by the fence, and there was the beings on the other side.
Yeah.
Yes, and I was like, "What is happening? This is so exciting!" Which is an awesome feeling to have when you're reading it, because it's kind of like when you go into the movies. I don't know if you're a big movie buff. I used to go see a lot more than I do now, but it's like when you go to the movies and whether you saw the trailer and it gave too much away, or just you've kind of seen the story before and you're sitting there and you're watching and you're enjoying it, but you're kind of like, I know what's going to happen, even if I'm not 100% right. And I know some people have the gift of not doing this, so shout out to anybody that goes in and just can completely turn their brain off. I can't, but I find that I still enjoy films like that, but I'm always blown away by stories where I sit down and I am just totally wrong and just I'm there for the ride and totally immersed. And that's how I felt reading all these books so far. And I look forward to reading whatever you come out with next. Really excited to see where Second Spear goes and for people to get their hands on the series. So leading into wrapping this up with you, and again, thank you so much for your time hanging out with Wicked Good Books and with me and just chatting your books and life and writing, and me stealing some bits of writing advice from you too. What are you watching right now or playing any games? Any favorite books you recommend? Any favorite movies or shows? What are you into right now?
Okay, well, I'm not watching anything apart from American Survivor, which I don't think is a good recommendation.
Each their own.
You know, turn off my brain sometimes. I'm currently playing Disco Elysium, which I've only just started, but it's really fun and really weird. So I'm enjoying that. People should try that. In terms of what I'm reading, I have not been reading anything but my classmates' work. So I'm hoping that I'm going to enjoy my giant stack of books that I brought back from America. But we'll see. Yeah, so.
I love that. Do you, I know that we live in this world of like BookTube and TBRs and Book Talk and reading a ton of books all at once. Do you find yourself like, not necessarily a mood reader, but when you finally get yourself to a place where your roster of classmates' work is down, do you have like books that you know are going to be next on your TBR or next on your, the first thing you're going to read when you have time, essentially?
Ordinarily, no. Like books are really expensive in South Africa, so it's more what's available at the library. And the library's gotten better recently, so that's fun. But at the moment, because I've got my biggest stack, I'm probably going to be reading Peter Beagle's The Last Unicorn, just because it's been on my like to read list for a while. And then Bujold, I got a ton of Bujold books in like I really hope I like her because I bought so many of her books and I have never read anything by her. She just seems like she should be my taste. So yeah, I'm going to be reading Bujold, and then I got Martha Wells fantasy novels.
Oh, nice.
As well. Yeah.
That's awesome. Do you have is there a local bookstore near you that you like to frequent? I can't, this is going to be a bummer because she is probably going to watch this, but Lauren Bukes, I believe, she's like a mystery thriller author. She's also from South Africa, and
I've met her. We've met. So
really
it's
cool.
A small scene. So
yeah, there's a store that she loves that she goes to, and like I remember
probably the book.
She said
like that's the only real independent bookstore in the area. But that's in Cape Town, and I'm lazy to drive, so I don't.
She was super lovely. She signed a copy of The Afterland for me, and like how we had to go about getting that book to me was so wild. Like, I had to like call the store with an international number. It was crazy, but I didn't know if you had any stores that you kind of frequently enjoy going to stores like that, or libraries, or more your jam.
I tend at the moment it's a lot of libraries. I really liked Third Place Books in Seattle. I'm wearing this shirt. But yeah, the indie bookstore scene in South Africa is not the same as in the States. I rapidly discovered. So like if I'll go to Bargain Books, which is like a franchise. They're kind of my local bookstore.
Awesome.
But they don't necessarily have like they're good, they're fine, they're excellent. They're not an indie. Yeah. Cool.
Love that. I love that you're playing I don't want to skip this part either. Disco Elysium. I've seen trailers of that game. It looks amazing. That's definitely on my list. So now that I know you're digging it, I got my buddy's been begging me to play it. Right now I'm like stuck on Final Fantasy 14 because my brother is like a diehard role player. He's been playing for like 10 years. He's been begging me to play it. And I'm like, I'm like, I have 2 kids. I have a full-time job. I'm trying to write this book. When do I have time to play an MMO? Like those days are over. But I'm making it happen because I love Final Fantasy, and so far it's been so good. But I do love playing the more indie games or the smaller side-scroller games. And it seems like Disco Elysium might have that vibe. So I'll check it out.
Yeah. It's a lot of dialogue.
So
get ready to read.
Yeah, I had a feeling it was gonna be a lot of reading. He's been yelling at me because in Final Fantasy there's a lot of dialogue, but it's not necessarily the best dialogue. So I've been like skipping it, and he's like, "Did you watch that part?" I'm like, "No, I didn't watch that part because it was like a 2-hour long text scene. I'll read the wiki article. I just want to get to the cutscenes," which is usually not how I am. But with older games, I'm just kind of playing it to see if I kind of owe it to him. He picked up some books on my recommendation, and then now I got to play some of his games. So, well, again, thank you so much for hanging out. I wanted to give you a chance to just kind of plug Second Spear here and kind of give the pitch, or at least let readers know what the story is about and why they should definitely check it out, or if they should read Border Keeper first. I've seen 2 answers online on Goodreads. Some people are like,
"Oh no."
I've seen Second Spear is a good first entry.
The situation is that my publisher and I have a significant disagreement about this, where they think it works as a standalone, and I adamantly think it does not. So I would advise reading Border Keeper first. On the back cover of Second Spear, it says it can be read as a standalone, and I'm sure you can read it as a standalone. But how much do you like being confused? There's a lot of the world building which is not going to make sense if you haven't read Border Keeper, but you'll be able to follow the story anyway. So if you really want to skip Border Keeper, it is within your power to do so. Other people have succeeded in this and been fine. But read Border Keeper first. It's a good book. It won't take you too long. Take it out of the library.
Absolutely. I concur.
I
love that.
Yeah, but read Border Keeper so you can get to Second Spear because it's the good one. Yeah, it's my good book.
Border Keeper is pretty awesome too. I've read it and it's great. And I'm also reading Second Spear. It's also great. So both are awesome. The Wicked Good Books recommendation is to also read Border Keeper, but also read Star Eater and also virtually anything Kerstin Hall comes out with, as well as signing up for her newsletter on her website. Super insightful, especially about the publishing industry. For me personally, I've been really enjoying reading those essays and articles. They're really awesome. And it's something that not a lot of authors dive into, which is fine. Like, I don't think readers expect them to, but also not all readers want to be published authors either. So it's like, ooh, I get to be inspired. I feel kind of spoiled, to be honest. Like enjoying your work and also getting to read your newsletter just feels like, I don't know, it's wild. But thank you so much for that as well. And everyone, check out Border Keeper and Star Eater, and read Border Keeper first before you get on the Second Spear. Even though if Tor is watching this right now, they're gonna be like, hopefully you don't.
I'm counting on Tor.com not watching this video. I love you guys. Please forgive me.
Their phone's gonna light up in like 3 days and be like, why did I? Awesome. Well, Kerstin, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Definitely enjoyed this conversation, and I look forward to seeing what you come out with in the future. So thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, it's been fun.
All right, guys, we'll see you on the next one. I have a couple plans for some shorter content coming out in the near future, but I'm looking forward to getting this out as soon as I can. But as always, we'll see you in the next one. Stay wicked.